Out here, the mountains don't care how tough you think you are. The rivers don't slow down just because you're tired. And the wilderness, well, it has a way of humbling even the best of us. I'm Fraser Rivers, and this is where the real stories happen. Stories of grit, determination, and the kind of moments that stay with you long after the hunt is over. The sun warmed my back as I stood on the western edge of the valley, surveying the rugged expanse below. The land sloped gently downward at my feet, stretching several hundred yards to the Chanta River, which wound like a silver ribbon through the valley floor. Across the river, half a mile away, the opposite slopes rose steeply, dense with spruce thickets and golden aspen groves shimmering in the late afternoon light. Scattered berry patches lay barren, their fruit long gone, while unfamiliar grasses and shrubs added layers of texture to the wild landscape. Behind me, the tundra sprawled endlessly, a rolling sea of red and yellow wildflowers, lichen-covered stones, and clusters of alder and willow barely reaching my knees. This valley was a natural corridor for game, the earth marked with deep, well-worn trails from the passage of countless animals. I had spent the day glassing for moose, spotting several, but none with a mature bull I sought. I stood at the valley's narrowest point, my gaze drifting upriver to a stony sandbar where my hunting partners and I had landed the previous day. My father and brothers, James and Daniel, had chosen to work the valley floor, moving along the riverbank, but I had lost sight of them hours ago. Now, with only an hour of daylight left, I resumed my patient, methodical search. Then, something caught my eye, a brief glint of sunlight flashing from the far slope. A massive rack of antlers shimmered against the trees. My pulse quickened. I studied the bull for several minutes, confirming what I already knew. This was the trophy I had dreamed of. Now I just had to close the distance. Alone, every decision was mine. Every action, every misstep would be on me. My first challenge was the river. I had never crossed it at this exact location, and the tumbling rapids were swift and ice-cold. With no time to return to camp for my hip waders, I had to find a shallow ford or risk getting soaked in the freezing current. The second challenge was my approach. I could stalk from the valley floor, using the dense vegetation as cover, or take an eastern route and hunt downhill. The latter option would put me facing the sun, making it harder to see the bull's silhouette. But the wind was steady, blowing upriver. As long as I didn't overshoot his position, I could remain undetected. This was not my first hunt in the Alaskan wilderness, nor my first unguided adventure. My longtime hunting partner, Lucas Donovan, and I had spent years exploring the northern wilds together. But Alaska demanded more. Here, survival was the real challenge. The weather was merciless, violent storms, relentless rains, and winds that could pin hunters down for days. Comfort was a luxury. Preparedness was the only way through. Lucas, my brother-in-law Mark, and I made a strong team. We were lucky to have a pilot friend who not only flew us into this remote valley, but also lent us key gear. Without air transport, hunts like this would be impossible. The landing on the rocky sandbar had been tricky, requiring hours of clearing debris to ensure a safe takeoff zone. But it had been worth it. Our pilot had scouted the area beforehand and confirmed the presence of moose. Now it was up to us to find them. I began my stalk, descending cautiously to the river, where it split into multiple channels around small islands. I managed to find a series of shallows and crossed without getting wet. Once on the valley floor, the thick underbrush cut my visibility, forcing me to climb to the eastern rim and hunt northward. A cow moose stood in my path, an unexpected obstacle. If she scented me, she would alert the bull. I carefully backed away and circled to avoid her. The sun was dropping fast, and I struggled to relocate my landmarks, the trio of aspen trees where I had last seen the bull. Then, movement. Just 25 yards ahead, a massive form stepped from behind a spruce. The bull had taken a single step forward, exposing his broad neck. I exhaled, steadied my aim, and squeezed the trigger. My 300 Weatherby Magnum roared. The 180-grain Nosler partition struck true, dropping the bull instantly. Up close, his antlers were even more impressive. Massive palms, thick brows, a true Alaskan giant. With darkness setting in, I stripped off my thermal undershirt and tied it to a tree to mark the site. The return to camp was a cold, punishing ordeal. While crossing the river, I slipped, drenching both boots in ice-cold water. By the time I reached camp, my feet were freezing, and my boots were soaked through, a misery that would linger for the rest of the hunt. Thankfully, Lucas and Mark had a roaring fire and a hot meal waiting. At first light, we geared up and headed for the kill site, this time wearing hip waders to make the river crossing easier. As we reached the eastern rim, two large bulls emerged onto the tundra. Mark moved swiftly, stalking one of them and making a clean shot with his .338 Winchester. Now, we had two moose to process, a grueling, back-breaking task. Dressing, skinning, and butchering a moose is an all-day effort. Packing the meat back to camp is even harder. A single bull requires 10 man-trips, and we had 2. By nightfall, we had hauled everything to the river's edge, but decided to wait until morning to cross, saving our energy for the next day. Just as we finished supper, movement near camp caught our attention. A massive bull was walking straight toward us. Lucas grabbed his rifle, creeping into position while Mark and I scrambled for the camera. The shot rang out, and the bull collapsed. Then, disaster. Lucas turned, his rifle still smoking in his hands. The barrel had split wide open from muzzle to receiver, the wooden forearm blown apart. Water must have entered the barrel when he crossed the river, freezing solid and causing the catastrophic failure. He had always taped his muzzle, a simple precaution, but had forgotten this time. Miraculously, he was unharmed, just sore from the shock. That night, we slept with rifles within reach, fully alert for bears. Grizzlies had stolen our moose meat the previous year, and we weren't about to lose it again. Sure enough, in the dead of night, a bear's guttural growl echoed through the valley. We remained still, weapons ready, but by morning, the meat was untouched. With the weather shifting, we spent the next few days hunting ptarmigan and feasting on fresh moose tenderloins. Then, winter arrived 6 weeks early, grounding aircraft for days. The lakes froze over, stranding hunters who relied on float planes. Thankfully, our pilot had tundra tires and could land on solid ground. As we moved deeper into caribou country, we watched thousands of animals migrating south. On our first flight in, Mark spotted a rare albino cow moose and managed to film it. The following day, we filled our caribou tags. That night, another blizzard roared through the valley, pushing the herds to lower ground. The only creatures remaining were the grizzlies, now searching for winter dens. More than once, a bear wandered too close to camp, forcing us to remain on high alert. Eventually, the winds settled, and our pilot returned, marking the end of another successful Alaskan adventure. The wilderness had tested us, but we had endured, stronger, wiser, and forever drawn back to the call of the wild. That was an unforgettable, self-guided Alaskan hunt, filled with challenge, triumph, and the pursuit of a true wilderness giant. Stay tuned for the next adventure, where the thrill of the chase and the majesty of these incredible creatures take center stage once again. Whispers of the North, a Manitoba moose hunt. A year of planning and anticipation had finally led us here, to the heart of Manitoba's vast wilderness, where bull moose roamed the thick willows and the untouched rivers carved through the rugged landscape. My good friends Logan and Bryce and I had booked this hunt with Wild Ace's wilderness outfitters well in advance, only to learn that the area was in the process of changing hands. Green Meadow Outfitters, owned and operated by Lee and Linda McMillan, was taking over the territory. With new ownership came uncertainty. Would we be guided by seasoned veterans or newcomers unfamiliar with the land? But that was all part of the adventure, and we were ready for whatever lay ahead. After arriving in Thompson, Manitoba, we spent the night in town before loading our gear onto the outfitter's float plane. As the plane lifted off, the world below transformed into a sea of endless forests and winding rivers. The flight was breathtaking, an hour-long journey into the heart of the wild. The pilot executed a flawless landing on a lake so still it looked like a polished mirror, disturbed only by the ripples of our arrival. At camp, we met our guides. I was paired with Bob Herrick, a seasoned hunter with a quiet confidence, while Logan would be hunting with Dennis Amari. As we exchanged greetings, I couldn't help but wonder how the week would unfold. Little did I know that we were about to experience both the highest of triumphs and the bitter sting of defeat. After a quick lunch, we loaded our gear into 2 boats and set off for our satellite camp, located 5 miles north of the main lodge. The ride was breathtaking, the autumn colours reflected in the glassy water as Bob pointed out key scouting spots from previous weeks. Once we arrived, Bob suggested a short scouting trip downstream. We moved quietly with the current, hugging the shoreline and scanning for fresh moose tracks. The willows stood waist-high, their leaves beginning to turn as the crisp northern air signalled the arrival of fall. Moose spend their summers foraging in lakes and ponds, gorging on nutrient-rich water plants. But as oxygen levels deplete and aquatic vegetation withers, they begin their migration toward the riverbanks, drawn by the abundant willows that sustain them through the brutal winter. At the mouth of a narrow creek, Bob beached the boat. We climbed a gravel bank and pushed through the dense brush where he had encountered bulls before. The ground should have been torn up, rutted by lovesick moose, but to our surprise it was untouched. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Bob decided we should head back. Just as we turned, movement flickered along the shore. We both raised our binoculars, scanning the dense willows. 2 mature cow moose stood grazing. Bob grinned, eyes twinkling. "If you find the ladies," he whispered, "their boyfriend isn't far behind." At dawn, after a quick breakfast of oatmeal and toast, we set out again. A faint northern breeze gave us the advantage as Bob beached the boat a half-mile from our target area. Moving quietly, we followed fresh tracks through a shallow creek bed, a corridor used by moose, bears, and wolves alike. Finding a dense patch of browsed willows, we set up and Bob began calling. Within minutes, a deep grunt echoed back, low and guttural, like a distant drumbeat. The bull was coming. Bob gestured for me to move downhill, positioning myself for the best shot. The moose crashed forward, grunting with every step, his massive antlers rocking with the rhythm of his approach. Bob stiffened, binoculars raised. "That's the biggest bull I've ever seen," he murmured. At just 12 yards, the behemoth came to an abrupt halt, staring straight at me. His eyes burned with primal intensity, his breath visible in the crisp air. He dipped his head in warning, ready to charge. Thinking fast, Bob let out a seductive bull grunt behind me. The moose swung his head, turning broadside. My Black Widow recurve was already drawn. In one fluid motion, I released a 700-grain gold-tip arrow tipped with a razor-sharp Zephyr broadhead. The arrow vanished, buried deep in his side. The bull lunged forward, disappearing into the thick willows. We stood frozen, listening. Silence. Then a tremendous crash. After a long moment, Bob crept forward, searching for signs of impact. Then he found it, the arrow slick with frothy pink blood. Relief washed over us. The shot was perfect. Tracking a mortally wounded moose can feel like an eternity. Finally, we spotted him. The massive bull had collapsed, his antlers embedded in the soft peat moss, his final resting place a testament to his sheer size and power. We let out shouts of triumph, exchanging high fives before heading back to the boat for our butchering gear. Just as we gathered our equipment, we spotted Logan and Dennis approaching in their boat. Logan called out, asking if I'd had any luck. I grinned and hollered back. I took the first one that walked by. That was an understatement. When we measured him later, he officially scored 210 7/8 Pope and Young, a new Manitoba archery record. But the hunt held a cruel twist. The next morning, Logan and Dennis encountered another giant bull downriver. They worked their way in close, every movement precise. The moose raked his antlers through the brush, responding aggressively to Logan's calls. When the bull finally stepped into range, Logan took his shot. A perfect release, but not a perfect hit. The arrow struck just below the spine, missing the lungs by mere inches. The bull bolted into the willows. Hours of tracking led to nothing but a bloodless arrow found 70 yards from the impact site. Logan was devastated. We all were. There's no worse feeling for a bow hunter than wounding an animal without recovery. But we knew one truth. That bull was still out there, still chasing cows, still ruling his territory. In the end, our hunt was a mix of triumph and heartbreak. My bull stood as proof of our success, but the one that got away served as a humbling reminder of the unpredictable nature of hunting. We left the wilds of Manitoba stronger, wiser, and forever haunted by the call of the North, knowing that someday we'd be back for another chance at the legend that slipped away. Thanks for being a part of the adventure with me, Fraser Rivers. Stay tuned for more thrilling hunting stories next time.